I want you to imagine, just for a second, being a true master of language.
Okay.
You are a writer who has spent your entire adult life searching for the exact right word to describe the darkest, most complicated depths of human experience.
Right, like a real architect of sentences.
Exactly. A taxonomist of suffering, even. You built your entire identity on this ability to articulate what everyone else feels, but, they just can't quite say it.
Yeah, that's a rare gift.
It is. But then at the very end of your life, you're struck down by an illness. An illness that just strips it all away, leaving you with just one single profane curse word to express everything inside your still brilliant, totally intact mind.
It really is one of the most devastating images in literary history. I mean, it's the ultimate cruel irony for someone whose entire existence was built on vocabulary.
Oh, absolutely.
To be locked inside your own head, completely aware of your surroundings, but entirely unable to cross the bridge to the outside world.
It is the absolute definition of a tragic ending. And it's exactly what happened to the 19th century French poet Charles Baudelaire. So today we are taking a deep dive into a truly unique text. It's called Mon Cœur Mis à nu, or My Heart Laid Bare.
Yeah, and we should clarify, this isn't just a standard historical diary.
Right. It's essentially the posthumously assembled fragments of Baudelaire's final unfinished project. And it was reconstructed by three assemblers working under the pen name Le Damné Lucide, which translates to the lucid damned.
And we really should explain for you listening how this text actually came to be, because it's a fascinating process.
Yeah, please do, because it sounds almost like sci-fi.
It kind of does. So the assemblers, Max, Claude, and Gemini, they didn't just invent fake journal entries. They took the actual raw fragments Baudelaire left behind in his notebooks and used them as, like, load-bearing walls.
Right, but how do you build the rest of the house without it just turning into historical fan fiction? I mean, how do you know what he would have said?
Well, it requires a massive scale of immersion. They algorithmically and analytically mapped his entire body of work, his essays, his art criticism, his previous poetry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they learned the structural mechanics of how his mind moved from point A to point B. So by understanding his specific thematic obsessions and his vocabulary, they were able to build the connective tissue between those original fragments.
That's wild.
It's not forgery, right? It's the restoration of a ruined cathedral. They basically finished the intellectual race. He simply ran out of time to run.
Which is incredible. And the mission of our deep dive today is to walk into that cathedral and lay bare the mind of the ultimate rebel and observer.
Yes.
We're going to explore his intense hatred of mediocrity, his radical commitment to beauty, his very messy romantic life, and how his tragic end can actually teach you something profound about paying attention in a really distracted world.
It's a journey, for sure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because from the very first pages, Baudelaire establishes that he is at war, and his primary enemy is the public, specifically the bourgeoisie.
Yes. And to understand his rage here, we have to define who the bourgeoisie actually were in 19th century Paris.
Right, they were the royals.
Exactly. This wasn't the old aristocracy, the kings and dukes who traditionally funded the arts. This was a newly comfortable, industrial, middle to upper class.
Business folks.
Yeah, businessmen, merchants, managers who suddenly had disposable income. And above all else, they valued respectability, safety, and commerce.
And Baudelaire just despises them. I mean, they actually prosecuted him for obscenity over his most famous book, Le Fleur du Mal, because it dealt with sex and death and urban decay.
They dragged his name completely through the mud.
Right. But then, after all that moral outrage, they turned right around and bought the book anyway.
Yeah.
He calls this moral tourism.
Which is such a great phrase.
It really is. And reading that, I couldn't help but think, is this like when you're sitting on a cozy couch on a Friday night, binge-watching some gruesome, dark, true crime documentary?
Oh, that's an interesting parallel.
Yeah, like you get to feel the thrill of the danger, but you never actually have to face the reality of it. You just turn off the PV and go to bed.
It's a solid comparison. But there's a more malicious economic layer to it in Baudelaire's eyes. He saw the bourgeoisie as wanting the experience of transgression without paying the psychological toll.
They want it sanitized.
Exactly. They want to stand at the edge of the abyss, feel a little vertigo, and then return safely to their dining tables and their perfectly respectable lives.
Right.
They want the darkness contained in a handsome leather volume in their library, while they maintain strict respectability in their drawing rooms. So to him, this unconscious cruelty is a form of economic sadism.
Wow, economic sadism. That's heavy.
He really felt they were funding the misery that produced the art purely to consume it as entertainment.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the hypocrisy that really gets to him, which leads to this wild argument he makes, where he claims that mediocrity is actually far more dangerous than evil.
Yeah, it sounds totally counterintuitive.
Completely. We're taught evil is the worst thing possible. But he says evil at least has aesthetics, it has commitment. Mediocrity just, well, it just seeps.
What's fascinating here is the physical mechanism he uses to describe that seepage. Think about it. Evil usually has a goal. It aspires to alter the world, even if that alteration is deeply destructive.
Right, it's active.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But mediocrity is entirely passive. It's the absence of quality. He compares it to damp walls in a basement. It just seeps into a room, slowly, invisibly.
Yeah, you can just picture that.
And as it fills the space, it permanently evacuates excellence and beauty. You can fight an enemy who is actively trying to destroy you. But how do you fight dampness in the walls?
You can't. It just ruins the foundation. And he pins this creeping dampness directly on what he calls the fetishization of progress.
Yes, the obsession with making life easier.
Right. He argues that every machine, every convenience designed to remove human effort, it also systematically removes the resistance that builds human character.
Which is a very profound critique of modernity.
It is. In his view, suffering and constraint are the actual beginnings of consciousness. So in a world that is obsessed with making things easier and more mediocre, his ultimate form of rebellion is the dandy.
Ah, the dandy.
Now, I have to challenge this a bit.
Please do.
Because reading about the dandy, it sounds incredibly pretentious. I mean, he's essentially broke, buried in debt, but he's parading around Paris in impeccably tailored suits, obsessing over his cravat.
Yeah, it seems very superficial.
Right. So is the dandy just a snob using poverty as an edgy fashion statement?
It definitely looks like that on the surface. But if we dig into the context of his philosophy, it's actually a radical survival mechanism.
Okay, how so?
Well, in a civilization that wants to reduce every human being to a superficial economic classification, you are a worker, you are a manager, you are a consumer, the dandy rebels by becoming completely unclassifiable.
Oh, I see.
You can't rebel by joining a political party because the bourgeois system owns all the parties. You can't rebel just by being poor because poverty is just the underside of their economic engine.
So what's left?
The self. The dandy treats his own self as a rigorous, disciplined aesthetic project. It operates entirely outside of money.
So the impeccable clothes and the aloof attitude, it's a defense mechanism. It's about creating a mask.
Precisely. The mask of irony and coldness isn't a deception. The face beneath that mask is entirely too raw, too sensitive, and frankly too specific for public exposure.
Right, because if you show the public your true vulnerable self, they'll just categorize it.
They will categorize it, commodify it, and ultimately destroy it. The dandy wears the mask to preserve his inner dignity.
Even when he was broke.
Even when Baudelaire was being chased by predators and living in crushing poverty, yeah. He wore that poverty with the awareness that his financial status was temporary, but his artistic self was absolute.
Okay, so if his public life is this elaborate armor, this constant exhausting performance of aloofness, what happens when he takes the mask off? Like when he's alone in his room?
That is when the real horror starts. We move from his external rebellion against society to a desperate internal rebellion against time itself. He calls this state spleen.
And spleen isn't just a fancy 19th century word for depression, right?
No, not at all. The text is very careful with its taxonomy of suffering. Depression, clinically speaking, often involves the future collapsing.
Like you can't see a way forward.
Exactly. It's the inability to imagine a different tomorrow. Spleen is different. Spleen is the present expanding.
The present expanding.
Yeah, it's the unbearable, heavy density of time in the current moment. The present becomes so heavy and agonizing that the clock itself becomes an instrument of torture.
That sounds exhausting.
He describes time as a hideous spider sitting in the center of a web of hours, just feeding on him.
Wow. And to escape that spider, he turns to intense chemical intoxication. He writes extensively about laudanum, which is basically opium dissolved in alcohol.
Yes, a very common Victorian vice.
Right, and he describes the high as a warm room with no edges. But it's a massive trap, because it teaches your nervous system a completely artificial vocabulary of warmth.
And the come down is brutal.
Right, when the drug wears off, the sober reality you return to feels impossibly, unbearably cold. And then he talks about hashish, which he says magnifies the mind and reveals what he calls correspondences.
The concept of correspondences is central to his worldview. It's the idea that the universe is a temple of hidden analogies, and our senses are all connected.
Okay, but I really have to push back on this romanticization of his drug use.
Fair enough.
Because it's so common to frame troubled writers as these mystical shamans. But was he actually finding genuine spiritual truth in these drugs, or was he just numbing the very real pain of his massive debts, his ruined reputation, and the fact that a notary was basically treating him like a child by doling out his inheritance as a meager allowance?
I see where you're going, and the text totally acknowledges the tragedy of his addiction. He admits that the drugs didn't actually kill the hours.
They just delayed things.
Right, they just purchased a little more time to despair in. But regarding the spiritual truth versus the numbing, it's complicated. The hashish did experimentally prove his theory of correspondences for him.
Wait, how does a drug prove a poetic theory?
Through what we would now call synesthesia. The drug chemically broke down the neurological walls between his senses. He would literally hear the texture of a sound or see the color of a perfume.
Oh, wow.
To Baudelaire, this wasn't just a hallucination, it was pulling back the curtain on the universe's hidden design. But here is the crucial difference, he points out. The drug is like swimming in an ocean. The sober life is like sitting in a chair reading a manual about swimming.
Oh, man. That puts it perfectly.
The drugs gave him the vision of the ocean, yes. But waking up from them was agonizing. And the poetry. The drugs didn't write a single line of the poetry.
It was the sober work.
Exactly. It was the sober, agonizing, tedious work at his desk that produced the art.
And it wasn't just an intoxication that he found these profound doorways. There's this incredible moment the text focuses on, the 3 a.m. dark.
Yes, a very specific state of mind.
He's a chronic insomniac, awake in the dead of night in Paris. The social mask is completely dissolved. He is painfully aware of all his failures, his debts, the cruel way he treated his mother, his own toxic habits.
He's stripped bare.
Right. But in that specific darkness, he experiences a strange sensation. A feeling of being witnessed by something that sees all of his horrific flaws, but does not flinch. It doesn't judge. It's a profound form of mercy.
It's a theological doorway for him. You see, Baudelaire refuses the clean, fashionable atheism of his intellectual peers, but he also flatly refuses comfortable, organized religious belief.
He's caught in the middle.
Yeah, he says he basically lives in the doorway between the cathedral and the street. And in that 3 a.m. dark, feeling seen without being condemned, it's the closest he ever gets to grace.
Yeah.
It highlights the massive gap between his aspiration for absolute perfection and his profound human limitations.
Which makes me wonder, if his entire internal worldview is built on this impossible gap between the divine ideal and messy human reality, how on earth did he handle real relationships?
Oh, he didn't.
He must have been a nightmare to date.
He absolutely was. His romantic life followed the exact same tragic pattern as his chemical escapes. Intense, soaring highs, followed by crushing, messy reality.
Right.
He was addicted to the ideal. He says there were 3 women who left geological evidence on his soul.
Geological evidence. Wow. Let's start with Jeanne Duval, because she seems like the most visceral.
Jeanne was his longest, most volatile love. She was a woman of mixed ancestry who possessed an incredible, commanding physical authority.
And he was very much in his own head.
Right. Baudelaire lived entirely in his head. He was a neurotic intellectual who was deeply anxious about his own body. Jeanne was completely native to her physical existence. She grounded him in the sensory world.
She inspired a lot of his work.
Oh, his greatest, most textured poems like La Chevelure, which is about discovering entire vast worlds contained just in the scent of her hair, they would not exist without her.
But the reality of their life together was ugly.
You're very ugly.
They fought brutally. They knew exactly how to verbally dismantle each other. And the text doesn't shy away from this. When Jeanne became progressively ill later in life and really needed a caretaker, Baudelaire failed her completely.
He just couldn't handle it?
No, he couldn't handle the intractable, ugly reality of physical suffering that he couldn't just turn into a beautiful poem, which contrasts so sharply with the second woman, Apollonie Sabatier.
Yes, Apollonie was the absolute opposite. She was the ideal woman whom he called La Présidente. He worshipped her from afar for 6 years, secretly sending her pure devotional poetry anonymously.
From a safe distance.
Exactly. She was the perfect glowing shadow of the ideal, precisely because she was kept at a distance.
This reminds me of, when you follow someone online for years.
Oh, right.
Like you build up this flawless image of them based on their curated posts or their public persona. But then say you finally meet them in real life and I don't know, they're incredibly rude to a waiter or they chew with their mouth open.
The illusion shatters.
The entire illusion just shatters instantly. Reality sets in.
That is essentially what happened, just on a deeply emotional level. Apollonie eventually found out he was the one sending the poems, and she confessed her love for him.
Oh, no.
But the moment she became available, the moment the abstract ideal was tested against the reality of a Tuesday morning, with human moods and messy hair, the romance lasted only a matter of weeks.
That is so sad.
It really is. The actual breathing human being destroyed the perfect work of art his imagination had built.
Which leads to a really uncomfortable question. Did he even love these women? Or did he just love the poetry he could extract from them?
He essentially admits this is his deepest, most pathological truth. He was in love with the maid thing.
The poem itself.
Yes. The poem he wrote about the woman was always more real and more precious to him than the woman herself. He lived his life at one remove from direct experience.
And the third woman, Marie Dobrun, really proves this.
Yes, the actress.
Right. She was a steady, ordinary possible love. But he simply couldn't sustain the reality of a shared ordinary life. She saw that he was incapable of being a true partner, and she left him for a steadier man.
She was smart to do so.
Definitely. The tragedy of Baudelaire is that the painful gap between reality and aspiration was the only place he could create.
Exactly.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Because this conflict wasn't just happening in his head or in his bedroom. It was literally tearing up the physical world outside his window. His beloved Paris was being destroyed.
Yes, by Georges Eugène Haussmann, the prefect of the Seine.
Right, the guy tasked with modernizing the city.
Exactly. Haussmann was demolishing the crooked, dark, medieval streets of old Paris streets that were, to be fair, prone to cholera outbreaks and political barricades. And he was building wide, modern, efficient, hygienic boulevards.
And Baudelaire despised this. He hated it because he felt the new city was being built for vectors instead of places.
Oh, like vectors, yes.
It was built purely for transit, for moving troops, goods, and people efficiently from point A to point B. And that ruthless efficiency meant the death of the flaneur.
We really should define the flaneur because it's sort of a lost art.
Definitely.
The flaneur is the purposeless walker, someone who strolls through the city and reads it like a text, who lets the environment happen to him.
Right, and you can't be a flaneur on a straight, sterile boulevard. The flaneur needs crooked streets, unexpected alleys, and the messy friction of old Paris to find mystery.
You need getting lost to be an option.
Exactly. And looking at Haussmann's Paris, I can't help but see a parallel to today. Are these optimized boulevards essentially the modern internet? Or our hyper-optimized daily routines?
Oh, that's a brilliant connection.
Like, have we designed our modern lives to be so efficient and frictionless that we've paved over the crooked, weird streets of our own mind where creativity and surprise actually happen?
I think Baudelaire would emphatically agree with that parallel. Progress accelerates convenience, and as he noted earlier, convenience is the enemy of depth.
Right.
Friction is what creates consciousness. When you remove the friction, you remove the soul. In the old vanishing Paris, Baudelaire documented the marginalized, the rag pickers, the drunks, the blind woman looking up at a sky she can't see.
He didn't want them forgotten.
Exactly. He put them in his poetry specifically to prevent their complete erasure by this new hygienic city that wanted to just sweep away its margins.
And the ultimate metaphor he uses for this displacement is the swan. He describes seeing an escaped swan dragging its webbed feet on the dry, dusty pavement of a demolished Parisian street, looking up at the sky, mourning a lost world of water.
It's so evocative.
It's the perfect metaphor for the modern soul displaced by progress.
It's the creature whose natural element has been paved over, but who retains the agonizing memory of it. Baudelaire really felt like he was watching the city he loved die, transforming into a soulless diagram of itself. He became an exile in his own hometown,
which eventually forces him into actual physical exile. The destruction of his city, combined with his insurmountable debts, drives him to Belgium, to Brussels, and he describes it as an administrative hell.
If Haussmann's Paris was the beginning of this frictionless, hollow culture, Belgium was its completion for Baudelaire.
He really didn't like it there.
No. He describes Brussels as having a sky that sits too low, pressed down on the populace like a lid. He notes that the people there perform culture perfectly. They have grand museums and polite conversations about art, but there's no actual interior life behind it.
Just going through the motions.
Yes, it's a beautifully maintained exoskeleton of a society.
But ironically, this painful, contempt-filled distance from Paris actually distills his memory. The exile gives birth to some of his greatest prose poems. He writes that the man who is dying of thirst in the desert knows most clearly what water is.
Exactly. The memory did the rigorous work of selection. It stripped away the overwhelming noise of direct experience and left only the pure essence of Paris.
But time was running out.
Yeah. The physical toll of his life was finally catching up to him. The syphilis, the laudanum, the heavy alcohol abuse, and the relentless sleep-depriving work of revision. His body presented its accounting.
And the collapse happens in a way that feels almost scripted by a cruel novelist. He is standing inside the Church of Saint-Luc in Namur, looking up at this breathtaking, overwhelming Baroque ceiling full of stone angels, and he suffers a massive stroke.
He is eventually transported back to Paris, but the strokes lead to severe aphasia.
Wait, can you explain what actually happens to his brain in that state? Like, what does aphasia mean for a writer?
Medically speaking, aphasia is a condition where damage to specific areas of the brain, usually from a stroke, disrupts the ability to process or express language.
But is he still thinking clearly?
That's the tragic part. The thought processes, the intellect, the memories, they can all remain entirely intact. But the neurological bridge that translates those complex thoughts into spoken words is broken.
Which brings us back to the image we started with. Because of this aphasia, the vast, beautiful vocabulary of Charles Baudelaire is reduced to a single, repeated syllable, grinum.
Yes.
A contraction of saccharum, a curse word, a profanity. But the text reveals that his inner life remained completely articulate. He says the words were all still there, hovering in his mind. He was just trapped behind a locked door.
A prisoner in his own mind?
Exactly. So what does this all mean? How does a man whose entire existence was built on finding the perfect word endure being locked away with just a curse word?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is an incredible piece of poetic justice. Crinum, sacred name, is both a blasphemy and a prayer. It invokes the holy by profaning it.
That perfectly encapsulates him.
It does. Think about his entire life. He was suspended endlessly between the gutter and the cathedral, between the physical rot of the world and the desperate aspiration toward the divine.
Between spleen and the ideal.
Exactly. That one single curse word contained both the profane reality and the sacred aspiration. In a tragic way, it was his final, perfect poem.
And the text shows us that even in that trapped, agonizing state, he still finds moments of pure, transcendent happiness.
He does.
He remembers the specific quality of a light in Paris. He remembers a moment where his mother sat beside his bed and just held his hand for 3 hours in complete silence. He realizes that the inner garden he cultivated through all that terror, debt, and hysteria was actually real.
This raises a really important question about how we view his legacy today. His life wasn't just a cautionary tale of debt and addiction.
Right.
It was a rigorous testament to looking closely at the world. He looked at absolute beauty, he looked at the ugly, at the marginalized, and at his own profound flaws, without ever flinching or asking for a comfortable lie.
He actually coined the term modernity.
Yeah.
And for him, being modern didn't mean rejecting the past or buying the newest gadget.
Yeah.
It meant the ultimate artistic challenge, extracting the eternal from the ephemeral.
Finding the timeless in the temporary.
Yes, finding a piece of eternity in a passing carriage, the glow of a gas lamp on a wet street, or the face of a total stranger.
He believed that modernity is exactly where eternity sides, waiting for someone who is paying close enough attention to find it.
And that brings us right back to you listening to this. As you go through your hyper-efficient, highly scheduled, perfectly frictionless day-to-day, what fleeting passing moment holds a hidden eternity? Are you paying enough attention to actually see it, or are you just marching straight down the boulevard?